In this last example, I'm going to show you how to create a checklist that includes temperatures with follow-up checks, and you may want to do this for food or water temperatures. I'm going to use cooking temperatures, and the concept is that we want to take the temperature of something. We expect it to be within a certain temperature range, and if it's not in that range, then we need to do something else. So we're actually going to use 2 follow-ups, and then we'll throw in an alert for good measure. Here's my spreadsheet with a list of food items. It's called Cooking Temperatures. I can see that it needs to be run Monday to Friday, and the temperatures need to be taken 3 times a day at 11, 1 and 3. I have a list of products that I need to take the temperatures of, and some notes at the bottom about what to do if the temperature is under. So back into the control center, and I'm still in the What tab. I'm going to add new to add my next checklist. I'm going to call it Cooking Temps. It's going to be a checklist, and save. Now we need to add our food items, so press Add at the bottom, and my first item was beef. It's going to be a single check, and this time I'm going to say Measure Temperature. In the Additional Details box, I'm going to copy the text from the spreadsheet, and then paste. Then we have Manual Temperature Check. If I tick the Manual Temperature box, then the person completing the check would need to type in the temperature. I'm not going to tick the box because I want them to use the Check-It probe. I want them to use the red probe, so I'm going to specify red as the probe colour. What this will do is stop them from using the wrong coloured probe. So if they try to use a blue probe, then they won't be able to. If you specify any colour, then they can either use red or blue. I want to be specific, so I'll stick with red. The acceptable range fields are the minimum and maximum temperatures that the product can be. From the spreadsheet, I know that the minimum is 75, and I'll enter 120 as the maximum. If the temperature is out of range, do we want an alert? No, not at this stage. But I do want to follow up. So if it's out of range, I need you to do something. If we look back at the spreadsheet, we can see that if the temperature is too low, they need to continue cooking until it reaches the core temperature, and then they need to take the temperature again. Press Save. That will then enable the follow-up check Add button, so I'm going to press Add, and I'm going to call the check Out of Range Temperature Corrective Actions. It'll be a single check, and I'd like a list of options. The first option is going to be cook further and retake the temperature, and then add the next one, which is going to be destroy food and note the wastage. If I want them to note down the wastage, why don't I give them another follow-up so they can do that? So I want to press Save, and then add alongside the follow-up check to this one, and I'm going to call this follow-up Number Wasted. It'll be a single check, free text, and this time it's going to be numeric validation, which means that the number pad will display on the device. It's now at this point that I want to raise an alert, because at this point I will have all the information that I need, and then press Save. So the last thing I need to do with this check is to make it repeatable, and I need to make it repeatable because if I go back, I've instructed them to take the temperature again if the temperature is low. So I'm going to go back to the beginning, and I can do that by pressing the back button multiple times, or I can go back to any of the steps by clicking on the step at the top here. I want to go back to the beginning, so I'll click on the first step, which is effectively the heading. So there's beef. I want to make it repeatable, and I'm just going to double check what I've done. I select the product. I measure the temperature with a red probe. The temperature should be between 75 and 120. If it's not, I'll then get a follow-up, which will then ask me to either cook further and retake the temperature, or destroy food and note the wastage. If I select the second option, I will then have to enter the number wasted, and then that will send an alert. Finally, I also want to make it optional, and I'm going to explain why I want to do that shortly. Now I'm happy with that format, I can create the rest by duplicating this first one to create the rest. So I'm just going to save that one, open the first check, duplicate to create a copy, and then replace the name with the next product. That was lamb. Save, and then repeat for the others. So duplicate, overtype the name with chicken, save, duplicate, and then pork, save, duplicate, and so on until all of the products have been added. I'm now going to move to a checklist I prepared earlier, and here you can see all of the products listed. We can also see that there are two other checks at the bottom, one that caters for other products and the other that caters for the scenario where there is nothing to probe at the time of the check. Both of these are optional. If I look at the other products check, you'll see that this is a checklist. So I now have a checklist in a checklist. My first check is free text, where I ask them to type the name of the product. And my second check is a repeatable temperature check. The rules, if you like, are the same as my other checks. So I use the red probe, my temperature range is the same, and if it's out of range, I have my follow-ups. So the behaviour of this check is the same as the listed products. The only difference is that I have to type in the name of the product. And then there is another check at the bottom called nothing to probe at time of check. And I have that check because the checklist is scheduled at specific times. So I need to account for the fact that there may be nothing to probe. Now, if I left the checklist like this, so all of the checks are optional, what could happen is that they open the checklist and do nothing because all of the checks are optional. So what if I unticked everything to make all of the checks mandatory? Well, I don't really want to do that either because not all of the products are cooked throughout the day. So I'm going to strike a balance. I'm going to say that all of the checks are optional, but I want them to complete at least one. So in the minimum optional checks box, I'm going to specify 1. So at least 1 out of 14 has to be completed. What this means is that a minimum of 3 products would be checked because my checklist is going to be scheduled 3 times a day. Now for the schedule. We're in the When tab, and we know that we want this scheduled 3 times a day at 11, 1 and 3 on Monday to Friday. And there are 2 ways that we can do this. I'm going to press Add New. I'm going to call this Cooking Temps, and I'm going to add the time in brackets just to make it easier when I create the line of work, so 11, 1300 and 1500. I want this Monday to Friday, so I'm going to change the date frequency from daily to weekly and untick Saturday and Sunday. With the time frequency, you have 2 options. If I select several times, I then need to specify the times I want the checklist to be scheduled for. So I type 11, add time, add 13, add time, and then add 15. Another way of doing this is to use the repeating option. I know that I want this checklist to appear every 2 hours, so I could say every 2 hours I want it to start at 11 and I want the last one to be generated at 1500. So that will generate every 2 hours starting at 11 with the last one generated at 3. The checklist will still come up 3 times, it's just a different way of doing it. So the last bit is the line of work, so I'll save that and then go to the Work tab. We press Create New, select our location, the team that we want to complete the work, the name of the checklist we want them to complete, and the schedule. and then press Create New on the right-hand side to create the line of work. Let's now see how that looks. Okay, so here's my temperature checks checklist. And here at the top, I can see that I have one optional check before the checklist is considered as complete. I'm going to complete the first one, and it should turn green because I fixed the first one so that the temperature will be in range. Press the product, take my probe, press the button. It will then vibrate in my hand, take the temperature, and it reads green because it's within range. So I can just press record to that and accept. Now what I could do, because I've honoured the rules of this checklist, I could press I'm done because I've completed that one check. However, I want you to see the follow-up, so I'm going to do a couple of others. I do the lamb, I take my probe, press the button, then take the temperature, and this time it will fail. So we can see our temperature range is there. I still record and accept, but because it's outside of that range, I then get my follow-up. If I choose the second option of destroy the product and note down the wastage, when I confirm, it will then ask me to enter the number. So this was my second follow-up. I'll then see the number pad, enter the number, and then confirm. So that's it. Our temperature checklist has now been completed.